Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you are watching Prime Time Asia. Let's take a look at the top headlines of the hour. The Kremlin says it is actively preparing for President Vladimir Putin's visit to India next month. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Moscow expects the December trip to be substantive, marking Putin's first visit since 2021. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry says it has received the bodies of 15 Palestinian prisoners from Israel through the Red Cross. Officials say a total of 315 bodies have now been returned under the US-brokered ceasefire deal. Thailand has suspended a US-brokered peace agreement with Cambodia after a landmine explosion injured 2 Thai soldiers near the border. Officials say follow-up talks and prisoner releases under the deal have been put on hold. China has lifted export controls on car chip maker Nexperia and paused bans on key semiconductor materials to the US. Beijing says the move, part of a deal with Washington, aims to stabilize trade after recent agreements to cut tariffs. South Korea's special prosecutor has indicted former President Yoon Suk-yeol on new charges of abuse of power and aiding an enemy state. Prosecutors allege Yoon sought to stir conflict with North Korea to justify imposing martial law. Super typhoon Feng Wong has killed 4 people in the Philippines after battering Luzon with fierce winds and torrential rain. Authorities say more than 1 million people were evacuated before the storm made landfall on Sunday. Malaysian authorities are searching the Andaman Sea for dozens of missing Rohingya after a boat carrying refugees from Myanmar capsized, killing at least 11 people. Police say hundreds had set sail 2 weeks ago, fleeing persecution and hunger. Japan has condemned a Chinese diplomat for extremely inappropriate remarks aimed at Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi after she warned Tokyo could act if China attacked Taiwan. Beijing defended the post as a personal comment amid rising tensions. Now, in Southeast Asia, Thailand has announced that it is suspending the implementation of a peace agreement with neighbouring Cambodia after a landmine blast injured 2 Thai soldiers near the border. The deal, which was overseen by the United States President Donald Trump during the ASEAN 2025 summit in October, was meant to secure a lasting end to hostilities following border clashes in July that killed at least 43 people and displaced more than 300,000 civilians on both sides. According to the Royal Thai Army, the mine explosion in the Sisaket province left 1 soldier with a severe leg injury, while blast shock from the mine caused another to suffer chest pain. According to the Thai government spokesman Siripong Ankasa Sulkulk, Bangkok will cease the follow-up to joint declaration which was inked in the Kuala Lumpur Accords in October. Now joining us to discuss this is Dr. Asta Chadha. She is at Ritz Sumikhan University, an associate professor of international relations. She joins us live from Kyoto in Japan. Apologies. What does this tell us about the fragility of this ceasefire deal, Dr. Chadha, that there has been a landmine explosion, 2 people are injured, 1 Thai soldier with a serious leg injury. It was all smiles back in November at the ASEAN summit, at the Trump-named Kuala Lumpur Accords, but now things seem to be unfurling a little bit.
Hi, Thomas. I mean, you rightly said too much is at stake here when we look at Southeast Asian security, because let's remember that the truce terms that seem to have been halted now were very, very crucial for bringing this, long drawn boundary dispute between Thailand and Cambodia. And amongst those, those terms of the truce were the fact that they would withhold any heavy weapon use, they would engage in joint mine clearing efforts, and then they would release 18 detained Cambodian nationals that
Mm.
had been detained by Thailand. And now everything seems to be pretty much on a halt because this is being seen as a severe setback. And the reason is that, anyway, that region is very, very fragile in terms of conflict escalation. The President Trump brokered deal, which was seen as, a breakthrough, let's say, in these dark times that were ensuing for Thailand and Cambodia relations, those are once again back to square one. Now, what needs to be seen, however, is that when Thailand says we are suspending any movement on that brokered piece, we need to see whether they are going to hold on to it up until the investigation is done on this landmine, or they are truly planning to completely suspend it.
Yes, and where does this put Donald Trump's credibility when it comes to making and inking these peace deals? A controversial credibility where he's claimed now to end 8 wars.
Absolutely. I mean, we all know that, that particularly this US broker deal was done amidst the others that could have,
Hmm.
in a way, gotten him from a Nobel Peace Prize nomination to an actual award. But this does highlight two main limitations, I would say. One is the limitation that exists within ASEAN, which is the fact that there is a loss of trust amongst members, and ASEAN is losing out its credibility in terms of resolution of conflicts within the region. And then a second issue arises in terms of how far can US really broker peace between two nations which are far away from its own geography and in cultural context or political context that clearly US does not seem to understand. So as haphazardly put together peace deal it seems to be, looks like now that it could pretty much be in shambles, and any new sort of peace process needs to be begun right from scratch.
How deep does this conflict historically cut? Does this reflect a deeper historic tension over border demarcations back to the Priya Vihar and other disputed areas of that region?
Absolutely. I mean, this conflict should in no way be seen as something new or occurring
Mm.
in the current political environment, because let's not forget, this is a very long drawn historical rivalry, yet again for poorly demarcated borders from the colonial era. So it's one of those colonial era legacies that has been continuing, so on and so forth. I mean, of course, the temples and the undemarcated borders, they have historically been zones that do seem to flare up. But there is another important aspect to this kind of a conflict, which is that on both sides, on Cambodian side and on Thai side, the political elites, every single time they use these volatile situations for their own political gains. So if there were to be a peace deal and if they were to have lasted, there are lesser gains to be achieved. And now that Thailand is in some way single-handedly or unilaterally talking about suspending it, it once again brings to fore how much of this is being done in order to address domestic political situations rather than an actual situation at the border.
Yes, Dr. Chadha, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of East Asia. Next, China has lodged serious protests with Japan over remarks made by Japanese Prime Minister Senai Takaichi regarding Taiwan. Takaichi told Japanese lawmakers that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could pose a survival-threatening situation for Japan. In response, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Juan warned that such statements, which meddle in cross-strait affairs, would severely damage China-Japan relations. Lin urged Japan to stop making provocative remarks and to respect China's position on Taiwan. The escalating tensions highlight the delicate nature of relations between the two nations, especially concerning Taiwan, with China which China considers a part of its territory. Let's take a listen in to the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson.
中国政府已向日方提出严正交涉和强烈抗议。台湾是中国领土不可分割的一部分，以何种方式解决台湾问题，实现国家统一，完全是中国内政，不容任何外部势力干涉。中方强烈敦促日方反省自身在台湾问题上的历史罪责，恪守一个中国原则和中日4个政治文件精神，停止挑衅越线，停止向台独分裂势力发出任何错误信号。
Dr. Chadha joins us once again. China has formally protested Prime Minister Takaichi's remarks on Taiwan. How do these comments fit into Japan's evolving strategic posture in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, hi, Thomas. I mean, you rightly pointed out that these comments by the Japanese Prime Minister and the reactions by China again seem to be yet another reiteration of their long-held stance towards East Asian security. So the Chinese remarks or Chinese protests should not only be seen as protests against Sanai Takaichi, stating how important Taiwan is or Taiwanese security is to Japanese security. These also in a way come in the backdrop of the fact that Sanai Takaichi is looking forward to practical cooperation and deepening cooperation with Taiwan in the long run. On another front, if you look at it from a purely Japanese security or foreign policy perspective, we do see that under Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi, Japan is trying to hold a more overt and less ambiguous show of support for Taiwan and Taiwanese, autonomy or strategic presence in the region. And very recently, Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi also declared, when she was talking about Taiwan, she stated that Taiwan is very inherent because it's only 100 kilometers away from the ultimate end of the Japanese islands. It makes Taiwan very important for Japanese security, and she called that Taiwan could constitute a survival threatening situation. Now those words are very, very important because if you remember back in 2015, reinterpretation was done of Japanese self-defense forces and what they would mean. And the idea here is that Sanai Takaichi is trying to allude to the idea that it could pretty much allow a legal mobilization of Japanese self-defense forces if Japan were to feel threatened by an external force.
Yes, and Takaichi herself has long been seen as a sort of Beijing hawk. And we did see the two leaders meet, both President Xi and Takaichi, in South Korea just around a week ago now. How do you see that relationship moving forward, especially with Takaichi at the helm?
Right. I mean, Prime Minister Takaichi, even in Japan, I mean, she's held that she has had that image of being a China hawk, but not only because, she's made those statements. It pretty much comes from her being a Prime Minister Abe protege, because we cannot forget here in Japan when Prime Minister Shinzo Abe mentioned, and he said a Taiwanese contingency is a Japanese contingency. So he in a way equalized both those security situations. And Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's remarks do in a way echo that position in some way, right? So given that Prime Minister Takaichi is looking forward to more closer economic and strategic cooperation with Taiwan, it is but obvious that we were expecting here in Japan some responses from China within the range of strong protest or serious démarche, saying that Japan is trying to violate its One China principle, so on and so forth. But more importantly, what it does reflect is that the situation in East China Sea and in the Taiwan Straits is only going to get more severe.
Dr. Ansar Ghazwat, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to have you on the programme. We now move on next over to India. And the Jammu and Kashmir police in India's northmost region have dismantled an interstate and transnational terror module, arresting 7 locals and seizing 2,900 kilograms of explosive devices making material. The operation was conducted earlier in the day in coordination with police forces in other states. More, the terror module is reportedly linked to the Jaish-e-Mohammad and the Ansar Ghazwat-ul-Hind. Several coordinated searches were carried out in Jammu and Kashmir, including locations in Srinagar, Anantnag, Garandpal and Shopian. Moreover, additional searches were conducted in Faridabad with Haryana police and in Saharanpur with the UP police. Among the items recovered were explosives, chemicals, remote control circuits, batteries and metal sheets. The police also found a Chinese Star pistol, a Beretta pistol, an AK-56 rifle and an AK Krinkov rifle. The investigation began after jihadi posters were found in Bunpora, Naugam back in October of 2025, and this led to the lodging of FIR under the UAPA Act. The police have revealed that the group was using encrypted channels for coordinating terror activities and raising funds under the guise of charitable causes. Among those arrested were 2 doctors, both allegedly involved in radicalizing and recruiting individuals to the terrorist cause. Now, a financial investigation is currently underway to trace the flow of funds and linkages to foreign handlers. Joining us now is Major General Sudhakar Ji. He's a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us here. Jammu and Kashmir police have seized nearly 3,000 kilograms of explosive material here. Of course, an enormous cachet. What does that say about the operational scale of this module?
Yeah, Thomas, good evening. Thank you for getting me for your show. As regards the question, you see, it is tip of the iceberg. Yes, on one hand, we do claim that since 2014 till date, the level of violence inside the subcontinent, I would say, has gone down drastically to almost zero. J&K, the Jammu and Kashmir continue to witness and experience signatures of proxy war being sponsored by transborder terrorists, by Pakistan handlers. The Pakistan army is deeply involved in it. Suffice to say that the doctrine of Pakistan, which was stated way back in 1979 by the martial ruler, the Zia-ul-Haq, General Zia-ul-Haq, he had said that to bleed India with 1,000 cuts. So that bleeding India with 1,000 cuts, in my opinion, in form of proxy war will continue. What we have been thinking as a dormant phase of inactivity or lesser violent activity has been a phase of quiet penetration and deep entrenchment into the ecosystem, in creation of ecosystem to sustain the terrorist activities. It includes the following things. Firstly, radicalization. Most of us don't even understand the meaning of radicalization. In what form, what manner does it manifest? Radicalization in the valley, Kashmir Valley, meant when I was there, visiting the mosque every Friday, listening to the speech, those inflammable, inflammatory speech by the mullah, anti-national speeches, wearing a skull cap, growing beard, and the trousers folded from bottom. That used to be the sign of radicalization. But radicalization has taken a different form between 90s and now. The internet is rampant. It is excess of internet, social media platform has facilitated and speeded up the process of radicalization. One doesn't have to go physically and report at a trending center to get subverted or to get radicalized into a different pattern of life or way of life. Internet is good enough. So that is one aspect. Second point is that radicalization has taken a very offensive and very belligerent, a kind of an extreme violent form that amounts to picking up the weapons that we witnessed way back in early 90s. Weapons, ammunition, and the third and most important thing is the flow of funds that you alluded to. The fund management and the communication both the things are taking such kind of encrypted channel that it is very difficult for the enforcement agency to narrow down and pinpoint and establish the choke points where you can actually choke them from a free flow of these communications or the funds. Last but not the least is that this is a white collar, they call it as white collar ecosystem of terror activities. What is white collar? White collar ecosystem of terror activities has picked up doctors, engineers, well qualified people. They're well to do families. They have got lawyers, they have got people who are in the corporate. Likewise, they have managed to penetrate and identify people under the headings as to who all have to come under radicalization, who will be there for fund collection, who all are responsible for creating a different ecosystem or running the madrasas. And likewise, they have got 6-7 headings. So they have classified the people, managed to develop them into very hardcore professionals to undertake the role of leadership as also follows. This is a very, very dangerous trend, and many more such kind of apprehensions and recoveries are expected. In my opinion, the ISI and ISIS both have joined hands in 2019 post abrogation of Article 370 and 35 Alpha on 5th of August, and after which the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Qureshi, he had air dashed to China on 9th of August. He met with the top leadership, and both the countries together they formulated a counter strategy against India. Then started the extended standoff along the northern border, and the proxy war south of Pir Panjal ranges were opened up by Pakistan, gradually expanding from Poonch to Rajouri to Doda to Kishtwar, then to the Srinagar Valley. And today what we see is a small manifestation of the emergence of a caliphate. They are called a regional caliphate because ISIS could not succeed in having a global caliphate. Back to you.
Yes, Major General G, do stay with us as we have further updates, but thank you very much for bringing us that analysis. We have some breaking news now, and it's coming out of Europe. And former French President Nicolas Sarkozy is set to leave prison later today after a French court granted his early release. Paris court further said that Sarkozy will be forbidden from talking to any justice minister official. The 70-year-old ex-leader, who was sentenced to 5 years in prison in September for seeking illegal campaign funding from Libya, will be released under judicial supervision pending his appeal. Sarkozy, who served as France's president from 2007 to 2012, described his imprisonment as a nightmare, and he was jailed on October the 21st, making him the first former head of a European Union state to be incarcerated. His lawyers immediately filed for his release, and French prosecutors have now supported the request. The charges stem from his 2007 presidential campaign, which prosecutors say was funded by Muammar Gaddafi's Libya. We will bring you all the updates as that situation, of course, develops. Now, we move back over to Asia, and 14 fishermen from Tamil Nadu in India have been arrested by the Sri Lankan Navy for allegedly crossing the international maritime boundary line and entering Sri Lankan waters. According to sources, the fishermen had set sail from Thranrangamba in Tamil Nadu on Saturday evening aboard a merchandised boat registered from Vanagiri with the registration number of the crew reportedly faced a mechanical issue at sea and drifted towards Sri Lankan waters while attempting to repair the vessel. Sri Lankan naval personnel intercepted the vessel and detained all 14 crew members. The arrested fishermen are being taken to northern Sri Lanka for inquiry. Fishermen's associations in India have long accused the Sri Lankan Navy of harassment and excessive use of force, including assaulting the fishermen, damaging their boats and confiscating equipment. The recurring incidents have put the livelihood of Tamil Nadu's coastal communities in jeopardy, reigniting calls for a permanent diplomatic solution from both the governments. Once again, joining us is Major General G. Of course, how 14 fishermen have been arrested. Why does this issue pursue after years of bilateral dialogue between Colombo and New Delhi in regards to this?
The entire issue has got a couple of ballpark points. We need to keep in mind the narrowest strait between Sri Lanka and India is the Pak Strait, and the narrowest point is around 35 kilometers between two countries. One. Number two, there is a small island called Katchavittu Island. This island was originally belonging to India, but in 1974, after lots of diplomatic engagement, it was handed over to Sri Lanka. And because Sri Lanka has been bidding for the same. Third, there is a expansionism of China's footprint in Sri Lanka around the coastal, the littoral areas of the Sri Lankan coast. Particularly, they are looking for the Jaffna Peninsula, north of Jaffna Peninsula, and this island that I'm talking of. Katchavittu Island is an island where the fishermen from India traditionally, they used to go, and after a certain point, the catch of fish is, because of the deep sea beginning to emerge, the fish catch becomes much more lucrative and attractive, and the drift of the boat also, and the wind direction, they tend to get drifted away towards Katchavittu. Katchavittu happens to be there as part of Sri Lankan maritime boundary. Therefore, the fishermen, despite the best effort, when they try their best to remain within the maritime boundary, because of wind factor, because of the factor of the current or the tide, because also I would say the hidden or latent attraction of catching more fish, which are more towards the Sri Lankan coastline. These are the couple of factors which come to mind. They actually tend to go beyond the maritime boundary, thereby, when the Sri Lankan Navy are left to no option but to apprehend them and take them to the nearest point for investigation. That's it.
Apologies. We have some breaking news, Major General G, but thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to get your insight. Now, coming out of the UK, following the resignation of the BBC's top executives, the British Broadcasters chairperson, Samir Shah, has now formally issued an apology for what he has called an error of judgment. This follows a memo by former independent advisor to the BBC's editorial guidelines and standards board, Michael Prescott, which raised serious concerns about the BBC's impartiality, particularly with regards to a documentary about the January the 6th riots in Washington, D.C., and President Donald Trump's alleged role in the incitement of the violence. In his letter of apology to the British Culture, Media and Sport Committee, Samir Shah has stated that the BBC has received over 500 complaints about the documentary in question since the publication of the Prescott memo and is dealing with these complaints in the normal manner. Shah has also accepted that the way in which the documentary was edited gave the impression of a direct call to violence by Trump. A huge development there. Now we move back to Asia for our next story, and Typhoon Fong, which has made landfall in the Philippines on Sunday night, has caused widespread destruction, killing at least 4 people and displacing more than 1.4 million others. The storm, which brought winds of up to 185 kilometers per hour and gusts of 230 kilometers per hour, triggered floods, landslides and power outages across the northern provinces. Fong moved out of the Philippines into the South China Sea by Monday after causing severe flooding and damage to homes and infrastructure. The typhoon's aftermath left over 318,000 people in evacuation centres, and rescue operations are now underway to help those trapped by floodwaters. The country was already reeling from the devastation caused by Typhoon Kalmegi, which had killed at least 224 people earlier in the week. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. declared a state of emergency as officials continue to assess the damage, with ongoing risks posed by heavy rains in northern Luzon, including the Manila metropolitan area. Let's take a listen in to what Adam Switzer, the Professor of Coastal Science at Nanyang Technological University, Asian School of the Environment, has to say.
Philippines gets hit by typhoons every year and has done for thousands of years. Is the number high in 21 this year? It's on the upper bounds, and it's certainly some concern. But you know, the year's not over yet. This might not be the final one for the year. Recent events across the region show that there is an uptick in these typhoons. So it's something of serious concern as our oceans warm and climate change has more and more impacts on our communities. This is a very clear example that you know, these typhoons are likely to happen more in the future and more frequently, and we need to keep people as safe as possible. The Philippines is always going to be vulnerable to tropical cyclones. It sits on the western edge of the Pacific. The Pacific is warming at a rate that's unprecedented, and that warmth generates very, very strong tropical cyclones. And so it's likely that our low-lying communities in places like the Philippines are going to be affected by cyclones going forward, and it's probably going to get worse before it gets better.
And that's a wrap on Primetime Asia today. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.